Comrades, the election wasn't meant to go like this, was it? Perhaps even, maybe no one in this room, but perhaps some people when they received notification of this meeting some weeks ago that thought what I would be doing here would be talking to a glum-faced audience akin to a funeral oration, explaining to you why, despite the vote, we're going to continue the struggle against the Tories and so on. Nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is the shattering effect has been on the Tories, the bosses and the ruling class. And what we're going to do tonight is to celebrate that result. To understand why it happened, and to say that this is only the beginning. That May must go, all the Tory policies must go with her. We want another general election, and we want Jeremy Corbyn in Downing Street as the beginning of a fundamental transformation of British society. Comrades, we now have a zombie government run by zombies, staffed by zombies, in the interests of zombies. Actually, that's wrong. Only in the interests of millionaire zombies. And it's a fantastic turnaround of what's happened, which completely confounded the experts. I mean, did you see, or you probably did, there we all were, anxiously awaiting the exit poll at 9:59 on Thursday, the 8th of June. And up it flashes, hung Parliament. Tories, largest party, but with no majority. David Dimbleby looked as if, I don't know, the Queen had died or something. A greater tragedy could not have been experienced. There they were, oh, a grum, a terrible moment, but not just him. I mean, I was collecting the predictions the night before. These is not, 3 weeks before or something, of the experts of what was going to happen. Here's just a few. Nigel Marriott, he's a very important pollster. If you go to his website, lots of YouTube videos of his method and colour tables and tabs and things you can print out and so on. Very important pollster. There will be a Conservative majority of at least 100. Chris Hanratty, he's even more important. He's just about to become the Professor of Politics at Royal Holloway College. The Tory majority will be at least 100. Lord Ashcroft, another very important man, lots of money, lots of polling and a modelling and so on. It will either be 78 or 70 as the Tory majority. The truth is they were all completely wrong. Cut off. Utterly cut off from the sense of what's going on in British society. And some of them have now admitted it, haven't they? Let me be the first to say I got it wrong, wholly wrong. Ian Dale of LBC, and a Tory blogger. I was wrong about Corbyn, John Rentoul in The Independent. I admit it, I was wrong about Jeremy Corbyn, Aisha Hazarika in The Guardian. I wasn't a bit wrong or slightly wrong or mostly wrong, but totally wrong, Owen Jones in The Guardian. I was wrong about Corbyn, Ian Moss, Labour Uncut. I have been crushingly wrong about most of the important political calls of the last 2 years. Alistair Meeks of Political Betting, put your money with him. Good evening, I know nothing. We, the media, the experts, the pundits, know nothing. Jon Snow on Channel 4, at least honest about it. I was wrong about Jeremy Corbyn, James Bloodworth of International Business Times. I was wrong, Jonathan Freedland of The Guardian. The truth is, they were wrong because these people believe that the population will do what the people at the top of society want, are too stupid to grasp their own lives in their own hands, don't pick up the deep alienation and bitterness and anger in British society, and whatever we thought about it, we knew from several weeks out that Corbyn had a chance because he was chiming with millions of people across Britain who wanted to see a change. Now we know that nothing is guaranteed. But I'll tell you, it has put the wind in the sails of the whole of the left, inside and outside the Labour Party. You'll remember George Osborne's front page on the day the Labour manifesto was launched. Comrade Corbyn flies the red flag. Not laughing now, George, are you, about the way that that's happened? So look, now the Tories are going to try and hang on with the support of the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP. A gang of arch-reactionaries, homophobes, Islamophobes, and people who stand for bigotry and working alongside terrorists. Created in 1971 by the arch-reactionary Ian Paisley because the official Unionist Party wasn't nasty enough towards Catholics and showed the occasional predilection towards reform. Based many of its leaders upon the terror group Ulster Resistance. The former First Minister, Peter Robinson, was an active member of Ulster Resistance, and all those newspapers who tried to slur Jeremy Corbyn for having links to terrorism have discovered now that the Tory government will be, if it survives, will be propped up by people who actually carried guns, fought in the streets against justice and equality in Northern Ireland. Worse than that, they tried to create death squads. In 1981, the older Paisley launched the Third Force, a group of men taken up a hillside in County Antrim, hoarding up their gun certificates to demonstrate that they could arm themselves against Catholics fighting for equality and democracy. A party so racist that when Enoch Powell was kicked out of the Tory party, he went to Northern Ireland and stood with Donaldson, who's become one of the leading members of the DUP, as his campaign manager. A party against equal marriage, against LGBT plus rights, a party, the only party in the Parliament which is determinedly against pro-choice and will do its damnedest to prevent the extension of the 1967 Abortion Act to Northern Ireland. And what a disgrace that a woman who had come from Northern Ireland to Manchester to have an abortion denied in Northern Ireland, today the Supreme Court decided that she had not been eligible for free NHS care and would have to pay for a private abortion in the future. That's the sort of people that now are propping up the Tory government. And we have to say that there is no place for them. We're going to drive out May and we're going to drive out the DUP with her. Let's just review. What's gone on is a devastating rejection of the Tories and was meant to solidify the rule of the right and entrench a hard Brexit has disastrously rebounded, leading to the resurgence of the left. It was May's campaign based on wooden, robotic, extraordinarily incompetent a campaign which the advisers must have said, Theresa May, we're behind in every demographic of people under the age of 45. So what should we do in the manifesto? We'll attack everyone over the age of 45 to see if we can push them into the other column as well. But it's much deeper than that. This was not the Brexit election. It was an election which was about austerity, about racism, about the hatred of the fact that since the beginning of the financial crisis, a tiny minority at the top of society have enriched themselves while the vast majority have faced cut after cut after cut, and the rich have laughed at them. And people can be dragged in lots of different ways. But in the end, that feeling found a focus around Corbyn's campaign and around the radical elements of the Labour manifesto. And it has meant, for one thing, an end to the era of Blairism. That's finished. Done and finished. And it's part of an international experience. The same thing that produced 13 million votes for Bernie Sanders in the Democratic Party primaries. The same thing that produced the vote for Syriza in Greece in 2015. The same thing that produced Podemos in the Spanish state broke in Britain as well. We are no different to them. The elements of radicalism, of a potential for change, exist here and now as well. Canterbury, Portsmouth South, two constituencies went Labour for the first time since the creation of those seats in 1918. This was the highest percentage share for Labour than the two elections of 74, 79, 83, 87, 92, 2001, 2005, 2010, 2015. Corbyn produced the biggest increase of Labour's share of the popular vote between any general elections in the post-war period. An extraordinary expansion, and one of the things particularly to relish is what happened to Muslim voters. There are 33 seats in Britain in which Muslim voters have the potential to affect the outcome. And at those seats, the Conservative Party was first or second in all bar one. In those 33 seats, there was a swing 5 times the national average towards Labour and away from the Tories, making sure that the Tories won in none of the marginal seats and lost 8 out of the 12 to the Labour Party. That was what the Muslim vote did at the general election. And the media, people tell us, don't they, the media control people's minds. They have no capacity to think for themselves. You know, these fools, they read these newspapers and they just do what people say. They tried very hard. The Daily Mail on the eve of the election, 13 pages to attacks on Corbyn, Diane Abbott and Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell. And by the way, let's offer our solidarity to Diane Abbott for the disgusting way that she was treated. And here it is, here's the filth. Jezza's jihadi comrades, that's the day before the election, and then on the election day itself, don't chuck Britain in the Corbyn. And it all utterly failed. We don't need that shit to tell us about anything. And quite interestingly, The Sun editorialised, your vote, if you vote Labour, will be to install Britain's first Marxist government. After which, 30% of Sun readers voted Labour. So, you know, 30% of Sun readers are for Britain's first Marxist government, which should cheer us up. But you expect it from the right. One of the great ways of undermining Corbyn was, of course, from the Labour right. And for 2 years, they have not accepted Corbyn. They fought against him. They've tried to get rid of him repeatedly. And imagine what this result would have been if instead of attacking him, they had united behind Corbyn from the beginning and fought as a party that was trying to win the election together. It's not by any means an exaggeration to say that Corbyn would be in 10 Downing Street now. It's their fault that he's not there at the moment, because the 172 who declared no confidence in him. And then people like bloody Peter Mandelson. Peter Mandelson, who said, I try to undermine Jeremy Corbyn every single day. No two ways about it. Until after the election, Jeremy's very sure-footed campaigning has delivered a political earthquake. Well, I'll tell you, I know there will be lots of voices telling Jeremy Corbyn that now is the time to open your arms and to welcome all these people back. Don't welcome back those who attacked it throughout the 2 years. Comrades, left-wing ideas are popular, very important for those of us who are socialists. The ideas of renationalisation, of taxing the rich, of more money for the NHS and education, of turning round the great juggernaut of austerity which has crushed so many people's lives and hopes. It's possible. It can be done, and the vote showed it that left-wing ideas have a big purchase amongst millions of people. This is not a right-wing country. Do you remember what was said after the Brexit vote on the 23rd of June in 2016? That what this revealed was the population were fundamentally right-wing, racist, would be pulled off by the Tories, and maybe worse than that, that fascism would grow in Britain. Well, that's not true. What the vote shows is the contradictory nature of the Brexit vote. Yes, there are people who voted for Brexit for right-wing, reactionary, racist reasons. But it's also true that it demonstrated the deep bitterness and alienation with the political elites and the setup in Britain. And those of us who voted to leave on a left-wing basis said that what would happen is there'd be a political crisis in the Tory party, that there would be an end for David Cameron, that he would be replaced, but that whoever came after him would not have a consistent, strong and stable hold on power. And that what would happen is that eventually there would be a general election in which Jeremy Corbyn would have a chance of getting into number 10 Downing Street. Now, the reality is that's exactly what has happened. But my point is not to crow. It's to say there was an honourable and decent case of voting against the EU, which implements austerity and has turned the Mediterranean into a graveyard for refugees. But this is not the time to return to the debates of the 23rd of June 2016. What it is to say is that we need to cease the division inside the working class between those who voted leave and remain, and move forward in a united way against the Tories, against the bosses, against the state, to win real gains together. You know, one of the great heroes of the movement was young people. Young people who voted in larger numbers than before, who registered in larger numbers than before, who delivered a huge gain, a huge lead for the Labour Party. The figures for the 18 to 24, 47% gap in one of the analyses since between Labour and Tory, as against 1% in 2010 and 16% in 2015. I have to say, anyone who was a student who didn't vote for the Labour Party and didn't want 9,000 quid a year back must be completely off the wall. But, you know, nonetheless, it's a huge social shift of people politicising, saying, I'm not going to just watch, I'm going to take control of what's going on around here. And what enabled Corbyn to do it in the end was left policies, policies that reflect what the trade union movement has been saying, what activists have been saying, and in addition, and very importantly, the mass mobilisation, the rallies, the people who came out in their thousands, and in the case of Gateshead just before the election, 10,000 people coming out to hear Corbyn speak, to hear other people on the Labour left speak. And it's a fantastic example of how you can move from politics being simply a spectator sport that happens over there into something that ordinary people have taken up themselves. The collective action, breaking away from the sense of just being an individual prey to all the pressures around you, is incredibly important. And we now have to ensure that that same thing continues. You see, we don't want this to be the end of a process. In particular, a number of campaigns fed into the election period. So one of the big campaigns is the question of funding of education, of the cuts in the schools. which led to big demonstrations, parents' meetings, parents' gatherings, even during the election period, people fighting over it. And there's one survey by Survation, who actually did quite well in terms of the election polling, which says that 755,000 people changed their votes because of the election funding question. And that's a tribute to all the parents, all the teachers, all the workers in education who fought over that question and didn't stop doing it during the election period, but made it part of the election period. And we need more of that now. More struggle, more resistance. The trade union leaders have to stop running away and start fighting. Because this government is so weak that any serious struggle, whether it's inside the anti-union laws or not, would flick them away in a moment. A serious national struggle could beat them back and sign their death warrant. That's the reality. Why? Inflation's just gone up, officially inflation, to very nearly 3%. Why should public sector workers be forced to accept a 1% or lower pay cap, which means that every year their living standards are falling by 2% or more? Why should we accept the attacks upon the National Health Service? Why should we accept a government that refuses to do anything about the question of climate change? Why should workers accept the bullying and the stress of managers on their backs? Why should we accept the constant undermining of public sector workers who are cheered whenever there's an emergency or something that happens in the bombings in Manchester, or the attacks in London Bridge, or the horrific fire in Grenfell Tower, but then we'll be told you'll be cut tomorrow and your wages will be cut the day after. It has to end, and the trade unions should be fighting about it. We understand something bigger has happened as well. People are looking at the way the system works. How is it possible that now the richest 1,000 people in Britain have £685 billion between them? How is that possible at a time when everyone else is told they have to face cuts? How is it possible that their wealth went up by £83 billion last year? Enough to fund the schools, to fund the hospitals, to make a better life for millions of people. No need for the attacks on disabled people. Indeed, the possibility of a better life for millions of people throughout Britain. How is it possible that we accept, while that's happening, the horrific statistic today that the number of emergency food parcels handed out by the Trussell Trust multiplied 45 times between 2008 and March 2017? How is it possible that we live in a world in which 8 billionaires control as much wealth as the bottom half of the world's population? Something has to shift, and what we saw on the 8th of June won't shift all of that, regrettably. Today we still face the same enemies, but we face them with much more determination and much more hope. And what the Corbyn vote has given us is a confidence and a resolution. And it's also raised one final question I want to raise. What if Jeremy Corbyn wins? And my guess, you can come back in a year's time and look at the tape, that maybe the Tories will struggle on for a bit, but in the fullness of time, and particularly if the level of struggle rises, we will drive May out. And there will be another general election, and my guess is Jeremy Corbyn will be the Prime Minister. And this raises the question of what sort of movement we need. Because if you look across the world, François Hollande in France was elected with rejoicing with the end of the Tory era of Nicolas Sarkozy. A brief period of reform, and then broken by the bond markets, the investment strikes, the refusal of the bosses to cooperate in any sense. Hollande moves to the right, implements austerity, implements racist laws against Muslims, against migrants and the Roma. Result, a growth of the Front National and Marine Le Pen and all the filth on the right of politics. Syriza, elected in January 2015 as the hope of Europe to end austerity. With good intentions, negotiates for 6 months with the European Union, gets nothing out of them, asks the Greek people what should happen, it gets a resounding no to the deal, the great Ochi no referendum of July 2015. We don't want to accept more austerity. And within a week, Syriza had accepted a deal that was worse than its Tory predecessors had elected, is now prepared to tear gas pensioners demonstrating in Syntagma Square and to round up refugees into detention camps and threaten to deport them to the tender mercies of the Erdogan regime in Turkey. Not simply because of the individuals in those governments, but because simply winning a position at the top of society is not enough. And my point is not to say, look at every Labour government. In the end, they've all been broken by a similar method. Look at Greece, look at France. I've seen that film before. I don't want to wait and watch the end. It's all worthless. That's not my point. My point is to say the only way that you can achieve fundamental transformation is to support Corbyn against the right, yes, to support Labour in the election, and we campaign hard during the election for a Labour vote. But in the end, what will be decisive is not how many seats you have in Parliament, but whether there is a movement at the base of society against racism, against austerity, against war, and against the capitalist class, which continues to own and control and will try and make us pay all the way down the line. And it's for that reason we need to build a movement based upon struggle, based upon resistance, in the streets, in the workplaces, in the campaigns, which is capable of achieving change, of fighting in the here and now, but laying the basis for a revolutionary transformation which goes beyond simply the changes that are possible in the parliamentary sphere. And what we have been given is a fillip to all of us on the left, whatever our understanding of how we're going to achieve socialism, that socialism is not dead, that we can fight, that ordinary people can be won to those sorts of politics. We can fight and we can win.